My name's Ian. I am a nurse currently at Lewisham Hospital. I'm the team leader for substance misuse. So that's the office we're sitting in now, is the office for that and safeguarding. They been nurse for 14 years. So at the time of the campaign, what was that, 2012, I must have been a nurse for 4 years then. And I was doing substance misuse nursing at Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which is the hospital the administrator was sent into. I grew up in Worthing on the south coast, moved up to London to do a sociology degree in like the year 2000. Sort of had jobs and didn't have jobs for a few years, then trained to be a nurse. Yeah, and there was this moment where I suddenly thought, oh, why not? I was sort of thinking I'd go work abroad or do something, slightly worthy, and then I didn't know what useful skills I had, and then suddenly I thought, I'm not squeamish, I quite like being nice to people, I could do nursing. And they paid for it. The government would pay $8,000 a year bursary. So I did that 2-year training. And then, found myself at Queen Elizabeth Hospital via jobs at Guy's Hospital and at a detox unit and at a prison. And then pretty much the day after, very soon after I accepted the job at QE, I think I might have even just given in my notice, I got home, put the radio on, and there was an announcement on the radio that the Health Secretary, Andrew Lansley, has appointed an administrator at the South London Healthcare Trust, and this was a first and only time, I think. And I currently, that's me mainly, and I have a wife and 2 children. Yeah. That was 2012. One of my first days at work there was the Summer Olympics happening, the London 2012 Olympics. I must have moved to Deptford in 2008, and the Tory Lib Dem coalition got elected 2010, and the Health and Social Care Act was brought in by them. So I'm sort of starting at the beginning here. Mm-hmm. And in order, a group got set up in Lewisham called Lewisham Keeper NHS Public. It was set up by Helmut Hybe and Louise Irvine. So at some point in, when did that act, I think, got passed in 2012. So it would probably have been about 2010, 2011. The Lewisham Pensioners Forum down the road, they put on a public meeting for people to explain what is the Health and Social Care Act and what can we do about it. Back when the Health and Social Care Act was being introduced, there was Lewisham had an anti-cuts alliance, and it was sort of resisting cuts to the libraries. There was disability benefits cuts. There was all sorts of activism going on in and around Deptford, but nothing health specific, except for the Lewisham Pensioners Forum had put this on with Louise. So me and my girlfriend at the time, Mel, went to that talk, and then I don't know if did we wait and chat to Louise after, or then at some point, and among all the anti-cuts stuff, saw Louise once or twice. There was an anti-cuts carnival. And it sounded good. There was quite a few hundred people sort of paraded up Lewisham High Street, banging on saucepans and stuff. And there's, a bloke, Ray, borrowed our saucepan, and it must have been bucketing down, because what I remember is this wooden spatula he was banging our saucepan with. He was doing it so vigorously, he just smashed it to pieces and hadn't noticed. And, so there'd been things like that. The Labour Council and Labour Mayor, there was a feeling that they were implementing rather than resisting cuts. It's a tricky one, isn't it? I suppose their budgets are being set by central government, aren't they? How much power do they have? And how much are they coerced with like this threat of administrators and things coming in. So anyway, so Lewisham Keeper NHS Public became a group. At the same time, the Labour Party had a group, I believe, called SOS NHS, maybe. And that was one of those, because it was mainly me, Mel, my other half, Louise, Helmut, Nina. There was only like about 4 or 5 of us. So we'd have times of being very active, you know, protesting. Simon Hughes was a Lib Dem councillor, so part of he had more influence to maybe stop the law, so we would leaflet and demonstrate around Bermondsey, and just again the 4 or 5 of us, and at the tube stations at Canada Water and places, and put on street theatre, and
who did the street theatre?
You know, I think a bloke called John Hamilton might have written it. Louise would know. At one point I wrote a thing, what was it? It might have been bullshit bingo or something. This is like a thing I always come up with and think is a great idea. But I couldn't make it. I was like working, I had a shift. And so everyone else had this script which apparently made literally no sense. And I think they were just like, what the hell has Iain done here? We've got to put this on in like a market square in Bermondsey. We were trying to exert pressure on Simon Hughes, Lib Dem MP, and get his constituents to know what he's doing. And I think educate people about the Health and Social Care Act. Started work at QE, the administrator came in. So ostensibly they said the administrator was going in because Queen Elizabeth Hospital was losing £1 million a week, I think, or the South London Healthcare Trust, so that was Queen Mary's, Princess Royal and QE, to Bexley, Bromley and Greenwich hospitals. Queen Mary's had already been shut, effectively. They'd shut that hospital down, told QE they'd open 80 beds, never opened the 80 beds. QE A&E was already out of control, like, you know, 100 people in a department, you know, early in the day, ambulances queuing round the corner, people in corridors waiting 12, 24 hours. So QE was bursting at the seams, and because they didn't have enough beds, but they would, my understanding is, Louise knows more about this stuff, they were okay at MRSA, which was the big thing at the time. There wasn't especially high MRSA rates, wasn't especially high mortality. It was a hospital performing okay, but losing money. And it had a massive PFI debt on the building. So the building cost 200 million to make. It was going to cost the government, I think, 1.3 billion pounds.
Can you unpack what PFI is?
A private finance initiative.
Okay.
So over the weeks after the administrator going there, the Labour Party and Tory Party each blamed each other for this. The Labour said this had been almost signed and sealed before they took power in '97. Labour Party signed on the dotted line, and, you know, early, like May '97, Tony Blair had his photo taken outside, you know, on the building site. We're building hospitals. The way they were building hospitals was by giving astronomical amounts of money to private venture capitalists, offshore tax avoiding companies, and then we'd rent the building back for like 25 years, and they had a monopoly. The owners of the building would have a monopoly on any work that happens in the building. So anytime you need to adjust it, because people's healthcare needs change, something needs to happen, this company would say, you owe us another few million. So like our office, they once needed to replace the blind or something, and the quotes and stuff was like hundreds and hundreds of pounds. We're like, this is just insane. This is just nuts. And they own the car park next to the hospital. They charge astronomical sums. This building, we're sat in the Riverside building in Lewisham. This building's a PFI. So the estates in the hospital can sort of, you know, patch up and repair anything else. This building, the company who own it call the shots. it's the reason the hospital was losing £1 million a week. Nothing else. Everything else paled in comparison to the contract that was signed to just hand over way above and beyond what a hospital costs. And this was a totally standalone independent trust. That was, spoiler alert, that was why the High Court reversed the decision, said it's illegal. His jurisdiction, Matthew Kershaw, the administrator, his jurisdiction was the South London Healthcare Trust. So the idea that he would close next door's hospital, bonkers, isn't it? Like, on the one hand, they've marketised and split up the NHS and said there's all these little things. And then even within that, they can't help themselves and say, let's pretend this standalone entity owes a lot of rent, and in order to pay their rent, they're turfing out their neighbour, like, I don't know, and selling their house. So, so that's some of the background of why they wanted to close it. And Lewisham Hospital. And it was only at the point at which Louise sent an email to those of us in Lewisham Keeper NHS Public and some other people she knew that said the administrator's going to try and close Lewisham Hospital. Like, it did, it seemed totally out of the blue that would in any way help anything. Particularly, like I said, QE needed beds, it needed investment. What it didn't need was the next door hospital closing. But you get paid a tariff. Each person who comes into A&E, you get a tariff. So the idea, and they wanted to cut their building costs, so they would sell stuff here, more people would go through the doors of QE, that's more money to service the debt at QE. So I've got Louise's email here if you want me to read it. Or not.
Go on then.
Oh, here you go. Urgent meeting of Lewisham KONP, that's Keeper NHS Public. And then Louise just said, dear colleagues, I've heard it's very likely a proposal will be made by the Special Administrator to close Lewisham A&E, as that will provide increased patient flow to struggling PFI hospitals. If A&E goes, then other acute services will go too, and Lewisham will be downgraded. And she said, let's meet up. So then, a bunch of us met. That was 17th of September 2012.
Right.
And the meeting was then pretty soon after that. Brian was there, who you spoke to. Louise was there, I was there. Probably this is at the health centre where Louise works.
Right.
And she told us that she had a very reliable source that this was going to happen. What would we do? And it was one of those meetings where not everyone just sort of says things and not much is happening. And I remember just sort of near the end saying, I think we need a Twitter account and a website and posters and leaflets. And Louise had said we need a public meeting and a demo. No, was there a demo? At that point she might well have said a demo. But that then basically became the outcome, and I just went out after the meeting and said... So I said I can set up the Twitter and website if no one else wants to. So then, and then that was it. Went home, learned how to do WordPress on a YouTube tutorial, looked up some other things and decided on SaveLewishamHospital.com, and got going on that. It was such a high, I think, those few months where we suddenly got up to 3,000 followers, and I was getting relentlessly tweeted and retweeted. Sat down, put on BBC London News, literally never do it, one Friday evening, and there was a health correspondent, and he said, I have just been told by, that on Monday Matthew Kershaw is going to announce the closure of Lewisham Hospital, and obviously there will be some local opposition to this, and it just was for whatever reason, they press released it on a Friday. And I was like, that bit, I think smarter people realised that would all happen, because once you sort of pull an AE, and a lot of acute services in a hospital, my understanding is there because anaesthetists are there, lots of anaesthetists who can urgently, heavily sedate people. So that normally brings with it the maternity, the A&E, the ICU, emergency theatres and stuff. And if you pull out the A&E part, normally means that whole core rapid response type thing goes, and all those other bits go. And I didn't understand that was happening until the actual thing came out on the Monday. But we so it was quite brief. I think it's probably there. I guess the BBC have it somewhere.
Do you remember how you felt in particular? Did you?
I was sort of buzzing. I really felt like, right, game on. This is because we'd sort of talked about it, and we, because I sort of knew, because of the good source, that it was going to happen, and then had the website up and running. I'd already tweeted at and drawn the attention of the website. I tweeted at Lewisham Council and said, are you going to support us if the A&E comes under threat? I tweeted at the mayor, I think. I tweeted at all the local blogs. Back then, 2012, blogs were like a thing, weren't they? And, and I said, pay attention to our website. Or pay, rumour has it this. But nothing like, probably still only had 10 followers or something. But it was just sort of putting it on people's radar. And the website the front page looked like a website, and I think it just had one big take action button or get in touch button or something like that, and then so it just very quickly, I guess I must have called Louise. I was like, they've just said it on the BBC, and so that gave us a few days. I feel like that gave us a real few days to actually set the agenda. And I'd been reading up all this stuff about search engine optimisation. Have you heard about this? It's so dull. It is awful. And so had Mel, my other half, to be fair. And we were, oh geez, it just doesn't. It's too boring to talk about. But it meant we felt like we can fill this space. We can set the tone of the debate and position ourselves as the people here, because they're not. What the hell were they doing over the weekend? I couldn't quite believe they'd done it. And so, started doing things like that. So then we were all set and waiting for the Trust Administrator report. Funnily enough, Mel, she was 6 months pregnant. Right, I know, with our first child. Yeah. So, I shouldn't have been spending all this time doing this. But I couldn't. At the same time, you sort of have to. Do you know what I mean? I was very conflicted, and it was.
Does that mean Mel didn't get to go on the buggy march then?
Yeah. Oh no, she would have. She went. Yeah, definitely came on one or two. So it was perfectly timed for that. Yeah. But
and did you have your baby here at
we did
Lewisham?
In the birth centre.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah. Every time I walk past it at work, I like it. They and so it feels so real. When you're having your maternity stuff here, and your antenatal classes and all of this, and you think, bloody hell, what if that goes? And we had moved from Deptford to Ladywell, so sort of in the shadow of the hospital, and it is the biggest employer in the borough. Lewisham doesn't have. It's not like Southwark or other boroughs, where they've got all these big things on the Thames and lots of things. Lewisham has less stuff, so it felt like, and you've seen where it's slap bang on the high street. It's
essentially it's probably shaped the current population, the infrastructures around it are all
undoubtedly and so many people born here every year, and the registry offices are next door, and you know, there's been hospitals here, like you were saying earlier, for hundreds of years. Like the idea that somebody one day could just say, when it is busy and functioning, and there clearly is a self-evident need for it, and then they turn around and say, no, you're wrong, we know best. So, yeah, with the maternity stuff as well, what was funny, we were having our antenatal classes down in the green zone there, and we met some people who are still friends, and this would have been our second or third, like, weekly class, and that must have been on a Monday, or the following Monday or Tuesday, and they said, have you heard that Lewisham Hospital might close? It's gone viral. And I was like, yes! I was like, I know. I was like, I can't believe it's gone viral. And it didn't, it never, yeah. I was like, that's me. I did that tweet. I've got all that going. But obviously everything else is everybody else, isn't it? There's in no way, shape or... Like, what happens then is everyone then is in on it and is retweeting it and owning it and sharing it and having that shock when they see it and having that reaction of like, shit, what are we going to do about it? Yeah, so then it was off and running, and then the report came out, and I was, generally speaking, at work at QE. My job was based in the A&E, so, you know, I could see how busy things were all the time, and trying to keep on top of all these tweets, media outlets, can we talk to someone about this and this, and trying to write articles on like my Samsung Galaxy S2, just like trying to quickly write, why are they closing Lewisham Hospital? And I'd be writing, I was generally at work, seeing patients, going on the phone, doing stuff, probably fielding calls from Louise or Tamsin or people about all the things which very quickly needed doing, because I guess we must have straight away put on the website about the public meeting, and they would have we probably always had a vote, what are we trying to get people to do, what is our thing, and every one of those things involves a ton of work. And very quickly it felt like you don't really want to direct people too much, because the offers of help and other people, what they do is brilliant. So we'd get offers from lots of people, like someone from Millwall Football Club. I think this was after I went, actually, maybe was it? Said, I work in the office at Millwall. You can have, whatever you need, it's yours. So when it came to the Rivoli Ballroom stuff, they printed off, all these tickets. At the semi-final of the FA Cup, they had all these Save Lewisham Hospital T-shirts on. Just provided admin support. Unions getting in touch saying we will help with printing and things. A lot of these things, and not everything comes into fruition, it happens just as you want, but a lot of people saying, what can I do? I've got this skill or time. I put just the bank details up on the website at one point. I thought, people keep offering us shit, let's put the bank details up. And Rosie said, we'd get significant donations from people saying, I was born in Lewisham, or I trained in Lewisham, and now I'm living elsewhere in the world. I can't help him, I can't be there. Here's some money and stuff. So the way the website is, it's just such a resource for all of that now, isn't there? There's tons of stuff. I'm trying to think. A lot of people then took it, people then wanted to go to... The administrator was having meetings all over the place to explain what was happening, independently of us. A lot of people and also Helmut was quite a fan of this, but they're like, right, what do I ask him? What do I do? So we sort of printed out bullshit bingo, and when he says certain things, you tick it off. Some of it became quite angry. Police were needed to get him in and out. But various organisations would get in touch and put stuff on and do things, and it was a bit of a case of go for it. But then once the campaign was out, once the word was out, then people just did stuff, and I guess we just tried to keep involved on Twitter, really, and on the website. And then the public meeting happened.
Were you able to be there? Or?
I was there. Yeah, jeez, yeah, that was like nuts as well. That was the thing. Do you know the Leshoff Auditorium? So it's in the hospital grounds here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't remember how many people it holds. Like a couple of hundred, maybe. Like, it's big. And you know, Louise has been doing health campaigning for a long time, and your crowds, you're sort of normally talking about 20, 30, and then she called one day, and again I was at QE and got this phone call from Louise saying the police are saying that hundreds of people are coming and we're not allowed to do it because it's not safe on the hospital grounds. I don't believe that. You know, I think we were a bit like, no, hundreds of people don't turn up, do they? That's just bollocks. That's just the police being police. It won't be that many people. And I think it did get quite real. And I think Louise was personally, as the chair, this responsibility was on her. And so I then was like, oh shit, what do we do? So I called up Tamsin from Pensioners Forum, Tamsin Bacchus, and she says, oh, hang on, I've got an idea. Have you heard of a 3-ring circus? No, I've not heard of a 3-ring circus. But it is, you know, there'll be like 3 big tops and the performers go from one to the other to the other. So then you've got 3 crowds on. Tamsin said, so we can do the Savile Centre was booked. So the Calabash Club down the road on George Lane, she got that booked. That's like a Caribbean day centre. So that's like a good few hundred yards away. And then we had, maybe the Savile Centre was also a place. And then also the hospital AV team. So the hospital obviously were apolitical in this, but said, have our room. Have this really big room. We'll put it on the big screen projector and we'll find a way to do it. And then the logistics of that was just totally nuts, because it was totally nuts. You know, having at the last minute going ahead, but hundreds of people did turn up, and people would turn up. I remember at the Calabash, people on crutches who were older and again turning up with family, and they had travelled up from, you know, sort of out into Downham and Bromley, and saying, we have to stop this. I was like born here, and they're with their family, and you know, and there's not room for everyone in the Calabash, so a lot of people had spilled out onto the street once it was full up. People are walking around with buckets. Again, we weren't short on volunteers. You know, people were like, how can I help? And people were just chucking money in the buckets and saying, I'll collect the money. And people were mostly forgiving and understanding. Some were a bit pissed off they'd made this journey. Only some of them were in that overspill room with it on a projector, and I was like running up and down trying to like make sure it works, and I'd take questions from people, and then I'd run down to the Leshoff. I vaguely remember it mustn't have worked because people were pretty pissed off with me, 1 or 2. A bit like, you know, I've come here, you've advertised this, and now they had some sympathy, but it started late. And I think, who was talking? Louise must have talked, Brian. I think the MP, the mayor, and you know, they weren't expecting us to just be shuffling them round Lewisham. But it looked, and afterwards in the Lewis Club, the social club here, I remember Brian saying, that was like a disaster, wasn't it? And I was like, but it's like Woodstock, isn't it? Everyone says Woodstock was actually crap if you were there, but it looks, I'm sure it looks good. And then, and we'll remember it. And then, of course, it did. It was on BBC London that night, and they're filming like the Calabash Club, and it is just teeming with people, and they're backed up, and they're like, people are really angry about this. And yeah, those meetings were quite, yeah, same sort of time. Then suddenly a lot of our stuff had said Save Lewisham A&E, and it was on the day that the thing came out. It was something like, oh my god, maternity, children's, all the paediatric stuff. So then we were sort of trying to insert that into the posters as well. and you know, obviously we're leafleting every night at Lewisham Station and stuff, and the leaflet is going like hotcakes, and yeah. So then that, and then it was on to the demo next, which was going to be hands around the hospital, I think was the theme. I don't know how well that went, but everyone again had ideas. Some people like, I want to organise a hands around the hospital, and someone's like, I want to have a choir on at this point. And today at the nurses' picket, I saw someone who had just come to support the picket, and then I'd mentioned, so I went along in solidarity with St Thomas's people, mentioned that I work at Lewisham. She's like, I was born in Lewisham. I was like, oh right, do you remember the hospital campaign? And she was like, yes, it was brilliant. And she was like a teenager at the time, and like, you know, it's good to think that they're still supporting picket. Like, I didn't, probably would have happened anyway, wouldn't it? But I think it just was an issue that made people realise, I think particularly people in Lewisham, that you have to resist these things. People were suspicious of each other. Some people did not like the Labour Party one little bit and didn't want the Labour Party to be even talking at the end of a demo. Those of us, me included, felt like you have to have the MP and the mayor because they are the elected representatives locally and they have political power. That's what they've been elected to have, and we need them on our side. And they wanted to be on our side. There was nothing suspicious about the way the Labour Party were in our meetings either. There was never a feeling that they were hijacking stuff. There was always a sense of what do you want, and people from the Labour Party were every day chatting with us, and you know, it was very collaborative. And that ended up happening. So that came down there, and that was where my abiding memory of that was, we said we need to get some money somehow, and I said, let's try and get some t-shirts printed. Do you know Martin Rowson? He's like a Guardian cartoonist,
right?
Who lives, you'd be able to see his house out that window, and we knew he was a lefty because his next door neighbour, who he helped us, actually, he went on to help us with loads and loads of design, the next door neighbour, Richard Proctor. He did later on fall out with the campaign a bit. So we asked Martin Rowson if he would do a picture and we'll put it on a t-shirt. And he said it would be a pleasure because he once got rushed to Lewisham A&E because he had had a wasp sting while drinking some red wine in his mouth and gone into like anaphylaxis. He was like the most bourgeois like emergency imaginable. And so he did this picture. God, it was a real effort getting these t-shirts made. Someone in Greenwich offered us a bit of a discount, but this is all really last minute, so I only pick them up that morning. Louise drives down and sets up a gazebo, and Mel is now like 7-8 months pregnant and just has a ton of these t-shirts. I was meant to help her. God, yes, the idea was we would both do this, stall together and sell all the t-shirts, but various people blocked other people from comparing. So it ended up, I don't know how, but I was like the inoffensive choice for all of it.
Well, there's a lot of pressure for you then.
Oh God, things. All of this would just be like phone, because everyone's busy and this is all happening quickly and we're working. So I remember Louise would say it felt like plate spinning and like all the plates are crashing, and people would make a lot of demands on, because it wasn't a constituted organisation. It had just suddenly become very big, and Louise mainly was holding responsibility for who speaks at this. You know, that was how decisions were made. There would be meetings, like 50, 60 people in a planning meeting, everyone piles in. The funny thing is as well, the unions who we'd approached right at the start of the campaign, who wanted were quite vocally saying they want nothing to do with us, that they would submit their own stuff. Actually, there's more to the proposals than this. They have to think about their members who might transfer at this time as well, and we felt like Lewisham Hospital was being asset stripped, or the local health economy was being asset stripped and made more lucrative to private investors to come in and do this. But so that was in the background anyway of people's thoughts about what was going on, and a lot of that, and the PFI stuff was another thing that would difference of opinion on this between Labour Party and other activists. Or Labour Party policy was quite big, so some people didn't want the Labour Party involved. So then, at the last minute, at the demonstration, I've now got to compare this thing. The stage is tiny. It's raining. I was 10 years younger than I am now, so I was like 31. And nobody knew me, really, at all. Like, compared to Helmut or John, or people who had been left activists in Lewisham for a while. And I was very nervous. But I did it. But poor old Mel had to do this T-shirt stall, and I could just see across like this wet field, you know, just this sign up, and all she had was like a biscuit tin or something, or a celebrations box to put money in. And I think we just said tenner a T-shirt. And she was like, people just kept giving her 20s and things. And these sold out. I think we had 3,000, we made like 3,000 quid in a day anyway. So suddenly we had money as a campaign, but Mel just like afterwards, we'd seen her like with this biscuit tin full of notes in the middle of Lewisham. She's like, oh my God, like, what do we do? Get home, quick. And it must have been so exhausting, like unbelievably so. Again, just nobody knew me, but Louise, just after she'd been appointed chair, said, I know Iain is good. I've done stuff with him. Can he be secretary? Or do people want... And people were like, vote for me. And then someone else said, but we don't know Iain. Can Helmut be secretary as well? And also Iain's wife is very heavily pregnant, and this does not seem sensible. But so anyway... did
you take the role then?
I did take the role, yeah. So as secretary, that was it, in the meetings then, and I was less involved obviously after the son was born. So then we had money, we had T-shirts. We didn't have T-shirts anymore. My other highlights were doing a Thanks Lewisham hashtag on Twitter one day, and just thought, why don't people say what they want? And it was one of those where you sort of think, this is going to backfire, people are going to take the piss, but it was so moving, to me anyway, to just read all these people. It's probably still out there, and saying all the things that the hospital had done for them, and it kind of focuses the attention when you're just like, oh my God, this is actually much more to people than I probably appreciate. We did the Trust Special Administrator had a consultation, and someone had come to one of our meetings and said, so they were closing hospitals in West London. They said, at their consultation, there were only 401 responses to the official consultation. And they said, McKinsey and these companies, consultancy firms, they're like, they have hundreds of workers. So their consultation, they lost like by 230 to like 190 or something, with positive and negatives. And they were like, these consultancy firms instruct their employees, go in here and say these things. So I went away and was like, right, we've just got to nail this consultation. So we set up, and again, Barbara and I think other people, you know, we would make up pro formas for people. I just had quite an explicit guide on the website. Tick no to question 4, yes to question 5, say this and this. And Cheryl, I think as well, I think a lot of people just really, that then became a real focus, was let's swamp the consultation. So it was good, we had people's attention, and then there was always something else to do. So then it was, after the demo, I think it was that. And in among that, some people on Twitter, including the Lewisham Hospital Choir, do you remember them?
Mm-hmm.
They had just been on telly at this time, and so they sang at the demo, and they had, Gareth Malone had set that up. So that was all good, it was all extra attention, and Chidi Ejimofo, who is an A&E consultant here and was in the choir, we must have tweeted him, but he knew Tony O'Sullivan and people anyway, but I think it was him, someone sent me a letter and said, this is our response to the consultation. And I think it was the A&E, I feel like it was the A&E consultants went first. It could have been a gastro bloke called John O'Donoghue. So they sent their letter, and they're so amazingly written, they're so articulate, they're so precise, they're evidence-based arguments about the harm that was going to happen if the hospital closed. So like, can I put this on the website? And they were like, yeah. And so then I ended up that sort of snowballed into us maybe on Twitter encouraging, if your department has done a response, send us your thing. We will put we will do the consultation. Like, do you know what I mean? On the website, we'll put it up there, and it was big. It felt huge, and it felt like that was important because it felt like we weren't just going to win the argument by force. We were going to win it by reason, and that we had all those reasons there. So that was another highlight. We're sort of getting to a point where I probably stepped back a bit not long after some of those things. Just before Christmas, like I think 23rd, 24th December, I just handed over all the passwords to Olivia and said and went
at this point you were a new dad.
I was a few days away. Luckily the due date was 28th, and God, I should have stopped sooner, but it was just difficult. After one of the very first meetings, Tony O'Sullivan came up in quite a modest way and was like, my name's Tony, I'm like a paediatric consultant, my daughter Layla can do social media, do you want a hand with that? And I was like, yes, because I haven't got enough hours in the day, that'd be great. And then I totally forgot about it, and then he came up again in a subsequent meeting just at the end, and then I was like, yeah, okay, let me take your name. And this was similar, Vicky would come up to me and be like, I've got this poster idea. I'm like, yeah, whatever, do it. And like, I don't know what, I can't, my time's full. And then I mentioned it to Louise, and she's like, oh God, he's like the director of children's services. I know the family, they're great. Get in touch, reply to him. And then that was it for a month, and there's the month of a newborn. And on the second demo, the big one, was like late January, so Finn was like a month old, and I brought him out, and I think Mel was quite poorly. I think we'd all been poorly, when just everyone gets sick. And I sort of limped out. I was like in and out of that demo. It was wet as well. I think I joined it as it went quite near the house, went to the end, said hi to various people, off again, and I sort of then was in and out of everyone arguing with each other. Louise or people be like, we need, we need the secretary, in inverted commas, to do something, or like, can you, more things. There was always another email, there was always something else to do. And then the Rivoli Ballroom party, I think, was about the only other thing I really got involved in. And that was because the Rivoli Ballroom is great. Have you been there?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So it was like an excuse to go there. And for that was a real effort. Oh, when Mel came out, we must have got a babysitter. That must have been... Yeah, the kids must have been months old. And we spent it sitting in the cloakroom with Lucy Pepper from Millwall. Most of it, you're just tired, you're happy to be out, and you sort of wander onto the dance floor for a bit. And then... but that sold out. And before it had sold out, at some point, again, I can't go into a meeting and not end up taking something on. We sort of said the prices. And then I went and looked at Eventbrite, and Eventbrite take money for everything. If you do an event through Eventbrite, they take a quid or two. And I said, I'll do the admin for that. That's just silly. That's like, if we sell 700 stuff, that's like £1,000 to people. We could have that money. Leave it to me. They can do it to my PayPal. And geez, it was a total, that was again, you know, sitting in the twilight with like a baby lying there, just like exhausted, for hours, because you'd have to tally up your PayPal to your thing. And a lot of people would do things on trust with us. The fact they're just paying it to me, and yeah. And there was always, I think it felt very, lots of things felt like they were very personal between people in the campaign, I think. I can't remember what the lineup was. I sorted out the tombola, and the tombola, that was another fun one. It's where like you sort of send a tweet out and you say, has anyone got any good stuff for us to give away in the tombola? So Martin Rowson, who's like, cartoons go for £1,000 a piece. He's like, you can have my NHS Jeremy Hunt original. Cheryl won that. Have you heard of a band, Public Service Broadcasting?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, Will Goose, Wilberforce, he had kids born. Anyway, he had a connection to the hospital, lived down the road. So Mel, again, you know, on her maternity leave, had quite fun, like, you know, knocking on the house, Public Service Broadcasting, going, oh, great, are you from the campaign? Brilliant, here you go. Like, great, thanks. A fella who does Tour de France presenting knocked on our door with, like, things at the same time that, like, our baby was choking, and Mel was like, can you help? He's like, so, you know, there was lots, and I think there's probably millions more stories. You could, well, you know, thousands more stories of people who